I'm King Link, and this week we're doing another head-to-head. In this corner, we have Yakuza Like a Dragon, and in the opposing corner, well, this is different. We have not one, not two, but three Yakuza games starring Kiryu Kazuma. So this week we're going to be talking a lot about Yakuza, but this is an interesting matchup. I wanted to look at how the all-new Yakuza Like a Dragon compares to the first three Yakuza games, 0, Kiwami, and Kiwami 2, also known as what's currently available on PC. Come on, Sega, fix this. Okay, yeah. So that line hasn't aged that well. I wrote the script before Sega announced the news. It sounds like every mainline Yakuza game will be on PC by March 25th next year, and also on Xbox One. This doesn't invalidate anything I say in this video, and technically there are only 4 Yakuza games on PC as I wrote this. And I'm also going to be putting up which Yakuza game it is in the upper left corner, so if you see a game and don't know which one it is by sight, that's where you can find out. And I'll be calling the first 3 Yakuza games the trilogy, because there are 3 of them. I'm also not going to be showing spoilers, so you should be able to enjoy these games fully after watching this video. I am focused on the first 20% of each game in the footage that I've taken, so don't worry, though I will have to talk a little bit about what happens during the opening of 2 of these games, Yakuza Kiwami and Yakuza Like a Dragon. I have 5 categories ready to go. I'll break down these games and see how they compare, but just to be clear, I'm not comparing Like a Dragon to each game in the series for each category. I will be fair about which one I choose. Also, this is fully opinion-based, so feel free to play along at home and score it yourself, but let's get started with the most common, yet probably pointless category: graphics. Alright, so really, I don't think graphics should matter that much, but everyone likes a great looking game, so they ask about it, and this series does look exceptional at times. For the trilogy, we're going to be nominating the best game in this category, and that's going to be the latest, Yakuza Kiwami 2. There are some absolutely amazing scenes in this game. This one looks just incredible for the amount of detail on screen. Yakuza Kiwami just looks exceptionally good for the time it was released, and adds in a new level of visuals for this series that really shined. Kamurocho, the main city of many of these games, just looks amazing at night. So with Yakuza Like a Dragon coming out this year and Kiwami 2 coming out 3 years ago, this should have been an easy win. Like a Dragon is not even a remake, it's a brand new game. The problem, though, is nothing really rivals Yakuza Kiwami 2's scenes. Now, to be clear, I'm showing cutscenes here. They should always look amazing no matter what your system is, and the scenes in Like a Dragon show a lot of talent in art direction and visuals. They just aren't as wow-inducing as Kiwami. Now, the battles do have a lot more particle effects and that stuff, but I looked at more the story and what you're really focusing on, not just what tries to dazzle you. However, maybe I paid more attention, but I noticed several scenes in Like a Dragon where I was seeing how limited the Dragon engine was outside of cutscenes. Characters can mostly walk and do minor animations if it's using the in-game system. And it isn't new for the series, but I found some noticeable issues with this title. Personally though, if I only cared about graphics, I'd probably choose Yakuza Kiwami 2 over Like a Dragon. It's a very slight win, but I think Kiwami 2 is consistently just a little better. However, Like a Dragon will not disappoint fans, and it will easily beat Yakuza 0 and Yakuza Kiwami because those games are quite a bit older and look dated by this point. It's kind of amazing how well Yakuza covers up for the issues of its engine with the stories that it tells that brings the players in and makes them really care about the characters who show up. Speaking of which, story. Obviously, we're going to have to talk about this one. Yakuza as a franchise now has 8 games in the main storyline. Yakuza Like a Dragon isn't an offshoot, it's actually numbered 7 in the Japanese title, but the franchise has a strong continuity focused on a linear time frame, so the stories in these games is very important. Let's stick with Yakuza Like a Dragon. The story here revolves around exploring a new city of Ijincho. This is a city with a large underbelly of crime. There's not only the Yakuza here, but also the Yokohama Lu Mong, which is the Chinese mafia, and the mysterious Gao Mi Jil, the Korean crime syndicate. I'm sure I'm butchering those names even after hearing them like 100 times in game. The story here does something that most Yakuza games do. The first couple of chapters here focus on one story, but the story then disappears with almost no reference to that part until the final chapters of the game where it all comes together. Again, there are some massive spoilers with this resolution, but it really bothers me that major story elements that was tied to are delayed for like 30 to 40 hours before they even appear again. This isn't limited to Like a Dragon, like I was saying, but it feels particularly egregious with this title, especially with the game happening in modern times where simple things like cell phones exist. Still, the core of the story in those 30 to 40 hours is very solid. There's always a major scene happening and a reason to push on with the current story. In fact, there's a lot I could go into that happens over the course of the game, but I think it's something that players will enjoy discovering for themselves. So for our trilogy, Yakuza Kiwami 2's story is just incredible at times. Yakuza 0 has two great stories that probably should have dovetailed, but overall are extremely strong. So I'm going to be nominating Yakuza Kiwami for the head-to-head this time. Yakuza Kiwami started the series off, and it's part of the reason we're still talking about the series after 8 games in the main storyline. It did something right. But the problem is, as a Yakuza game, it's kind of weak. Don't get me wrong, you deal with Yakuza for most of the game and have an uber-serious story along with great scenes. The problem I have with Yakuza Kiwami is you also have half the story focused on Haruka, who is a little girl that Kiryu adopts, and really doesn't feel like she has much to do with the story. Don't get me wrong, Haruka does eventually become a great character in the series, and I really like how the franchise has evolved her character. The problem is, for a game focused on Yakuzas and the underbelly of the city, there's an awful lot of raising a young girl and a dog. It feels like there are points where Yakuza Kiwami and really the original Yakuza game were not fully committed to a story on the Yakuza, and the experience in Yakuza Kiwami left a decent chunk to be desired. Though, okay, quick trivia time that's important. The Japanese name of the entire series is Ryu ga Gotoku. Sorry about butchering that, but it translates to Like a Dragon. The newest game in the series has a different title, of course. Like a Dragon 7, The Whereabouts of Light and Darkness. So, yes, the Japanese name of this game isn't Yakuza, but it's clear what this franchise wants to be about. There's also a few scenes that just kind of feel out of place with Yakuza Kiwami. In general, Like a Dragon just feels like a more solid and interesting story, and I will also fully admit that I'm choosing Yakuza Kiwami because Yakuza 0 and Yakuza Kiwami 2 are some of my favorite stories of all time, though, after finishing Like a Dragon, I actually might say Like a Dragon could be better than Yakuza 0 in a couple places, and a couple steps just behind Kiwami 2, which I think is very high praise. The middle of Like a Dragon, though, had me concerned, but looking back at this entire story, Like a Dragon has this incredible finale, which, unfortunately, I can't talk about here, but it does bring the entire thing together. Also, Like a Dragon has an English dub and localization that is just absolutely fantastic and worthy of praise on its own. It's the only game in the series besides the original PlayStation 2 Yakuza that has that, and that original had Mark Hamill as Majima, which is hilarious on its own. I hope we'll see more like this in the future because it's a great option. You can have Japanese or English audio, it's up to you. But I have been avoiding talking about one part of the story. Really, it's going to be the characters that matter in a story drama like this, so we're going to talk about characters. So let me tell you about the main character of these games. There's a young, caring, and talented Yakuza member who does what's right instead of what's easy. He, however, has to go to jail because of a murder committed by someone he's close to, and he then spends 18 years in prison and finds out that his family has turned his back on him. Oh, wait. Sorry, this is the wrong video. That was Kiryu Kazuma from the original trilogy. I'm actually talking about Ichiban Kasuga from Like a Dragon. But if you're a fan of the series, the difference between Kiryu's introduction in Kiwami and Ichiban's introduction in Like a Dragon is... Kiryu only went to jail for 10 years. Weird. This is really a minor issue after playing the entire game, but it's a strange one for it to start on. Like a Dragon has almost the exact same setup as the original game of this franchise, introducing a brand new character in the same way. And, admittedly, this is hardly the only time it's been done in the series, if you know what I mean. Part of the reason for this is that the series has this uncomfortable closeness to the Yakuza. I'm not a Yakuza expert myself, I've read a lot about them, and from what I've read, I can honestly say, as an American, I may never be able to really discuss this appropriately. Sorry. However, the short version is in a game about Yakuza, Sega feels more comfortable with the main character not actually being a Yakuza, even though he's continually assisting and helping Yakuza, was a former Yakuza, and is even trying to get back into the Yakuza in most of these games. Alright, back to the games themselves. Well, Kiryu and Ichiban have a similar arc in the first couple hours. They are very different characters. Kiryu is a very serious man who is focused on honor and family and doing what's right. He's brought into many situations almost against his will at times, but will never turn his back on his friends or even a random stranger. There's a strong sense of honor with Kiryu, and that's one of the reasons he's been in almost every game in this series. Ichiban, on the other hand, is different than Kiryu. He's still a strong, honorable person as well, but he's a little more focused on, like, Dragon Quest early on, even name-dropping it. But beyond that, where Kiryu feels like he's getting dragged into these outlandish situations that he finds himself, Ichiban feels like he's running towards these situations and enjoys the zaniness that awaits him in the side quests. He also makes a decent amount of references to RPGs, which does make sense because Like a Dragon is an RPG, but he's a little sillier than Kiryu can be. With just these two characters, I'd pick Kiryu every time. Kiryu has been developed over 3 games, but I think he's also a better character. Yet, Like a Dragon gets a few more characters as well, and I think it's fair to talk about the initial party here. Ichiban might not stand up to Kiryu, but there's actually several playable characters. I'll only talk about the first 2 you find, but in them you actually have a rather strong group. Namba is a homeless bum who ends up helping Ichiban out, and Adachi is a former police officer. Unlike in all 3 of the Yakuza games, this is an actual party. You spend almost all your time with these guys at your side, and you'll learn a lot more about them throughout the entire story. Each character in your party also has their own backstory that you can find out when going out for drinks with them in a bar or such. All these characters are wonderfully developed, and they're all tying into the story to develop the characters as well, which does really help. On the other hand, the trilogy has some great characters, but most of them have limited development. They may show up for some exposition or tell their backstory, but not many characters stick around for the entire game. Though I will also say that the original Yakuza games do a far better job of developing their villains. I can't talk about most of them without spoilers, of course, though I will say that Majima Goro, who appeared in the original Yakuza game as a villain, has over the time become such a fan favorite that he's actually one of the playable protagonists in Yakuza 0. So for me, yeah, I take Kiryu any day. The same is true for Majima, of course. These are 2 of my favorite characters in any video game. But I would also rather have the entire Like a Dragon team than just Kiryu and Majima. As great as those 2 characters are, there's 7 playable characters in Like a Dragon, and each one feels fully fleshed out and interesting. I personally call this a tie, but okay, slight advantage to the original trilogy because, like I said, they have stronger main characters that does matter a bit more, and with 3 games to develop them. Kiryu just might be impossible to beat at this point. He also appears as the main character in every game up to Like a Dragon, which, yeah, that just makes him so much stronger. But with that being such a spoilerific topic for almost any villain here, maybe we need to take a side trip or a side stories. So Yakuza is defined by its take on the open world format. This isn't GTA, but much of Yakuza is about exploring a large area of Kamurocho, which is supposed to be a neighborhood in Tokyo. You can also go to Sodenburi, which is based on a section of Osaka, and it's a solid map, but quite a bit smaller. However, there's still tons that can be done with that map. Both of these cities are a good size, but they're also jam-packed with content. There's everything from random people to missions to side stories that players will almost always run into. It may seem like a small area, but these maps are so dense that I don't have a problem with these games reusing the same city multiple times, especially because the city itself evolves itself between each game and it's filled with new things to see. On the other hand, the main core of Like a Dragon takes place in Ijingsho, which is based on a version of Yokohama. I believe Ijingsho is the bigger city. People have said it's actually 3 to 4 times as big as Kamurocho. It probably is. But personally, I like Kamurocho a little bit better because it has more personality. The smaller, cramped size and the side streets, alleys, all of that work better because there's less area to explore and more ability to stumble on interesting pieces of it. Ijingsho is bigger, so it sounds like it should be better for exploration, but it seems like the developers have to give more hints on the player where to go, and stuff is more spread out. What you find in the cities, though, is far more important. Every city here has tons of content, and every game has over 50 side quests and multiple minigames. In fact, just to discuss every side mission in just one game could fill up a full video. Let's just look at the 3 big mini-games in Yakuza 0. First, there's the slot car racing, and this is rather fun. However, it's almost a puzzle and trying to have to min-max your car through parts that you'll find. Still, this entire game is so over the top, I absolutely fell in love with playing it. Second, there's the property management minigame where you can go buy up stores and then profit off of them. Honestly, it's not the deepest mode in the game, but I love exploring the world and finding new properties. And finally, my favorite out of all the games, the Cabaret Club management. In our hardcore gangster simulator, you can actually play dress-up and match girls to customers to try to maximize your profits. This is a really strange minigame, but I've played hours of it because it's so compelling, not to mention the side stories found in it. Those are really good minigames. Admittedly, I think property management was a better minigame when I first played Yakuza 0, and looking back on it, it's probably a little bit weaker than I thought, but Well, okay, let's look at Like a Dragon. There are two major mini games in this one. The first is another property management game, and to be honest, I actually wouldn't have minded a repeat of Yakuza 0, but this is a different game. In this version, you can just buy properties without having to hunt them down. They also can use your employees to run the stores and try to level up the abilities to make more money at each store. At a simple level, though, this works, but it's very passive, and since you never have to leave the office or wait for a timer to run down, you can just grind this out relatively quickly. The big part of the minigame is the shareholder meeting, where you, again, use your employees to battle against random people and try to knock down their arguments in a simple system. Once you understand the rules, this also becomes kind of routine. The big issue, though, I had with this game is it's really not that fun, but even if you enjoy it, you can just get better characters later on in the game, and the pre-ordered DLC had bonus characters that completely unbalances this minigame to the point that it's almost trivial. Kind of a shame. The other big minigame is Dragon Kart Racing, where you race go-karts, shoot guns and rockets at other karts, and try to win races. It's really a simple version of Mario Kart, but it works for what it is, and I do like that the courses run through the main city. It's not the deepest, but it will keep you entertained. There are also a few other minigames that are a little bit smaller scale but really shine, such as a very simple can collection minigame that's quite fun to play. I do wish there was a few more courses though. Also, a minigame where Ichiban tries to stay awake at a theater through a boring movie. This is just part of the zaniness that only the Yakuza franchise can manage. But the property management minigame in Like a Dragon is very similar to Yakuza Zero's version, only a little weaker, and I feel like a couple of side stories run into this at the same time. For instance, one of my favorite side stories in Yakuza Kiwami 2 is Be My Baby, which is on screen now. It's a funny, humorous moment where you have Yakuza dressed up as babies and end up fighting them in the diapers. Yakuza Like a Dragon uses those same characters in a very similar joke, but of course Ichiban plays into the scene where Kiryu tried to avoid it. That is of course the big difference between these characters, but seeing the same joke was a bit weak. At the same time, Like a Dragon isn't all about callbacks. There's a side story about a guy covered in bubbles trying to hide, and this was absolutely hilarious, and most of the side stories are new and fresh. A couple of them, though, are callbacks to the other games. I'm a little bit torn on this. Like a Dragon has tons of minigames that are some of the best in the series. It's a collection of the best and still has tons of new additions. Yet, it lacks my favorite minigame where you run a cabaret club, even though you can visit one. But I think what pushes this over the edge to me is the side stories here are excellent. There's quite a few that I focused on because I wanted to know what happened to the next random character that I'll run into. These are perhaps some of the best side stories in the entire series, at the same level as Kiwami 2. And I think, honestly, I might give this one to Like a Dragon, but really it's neck and neck and neck and neck for me. You won't be hurting for content in any of these games, to be honest, and that's a great sign. So that's it. I'm sure there's nothing else to talk about with these games. We've discussed graphics, story, characters, and the minigames, so what else would you want to talk about? Oh, wait. Well, yeah, of course, we forgot the most important part. Combat. So how can we compare these really different games? In the original trilogy, you have what I like to call a 3D beat-em-up. You run around, fight enemies, move on, and really kick some ass. It's all done in real time, and it's almost like a standard fighting game in that you have to dodge attacks, possibly block, yeah right, and then beat down enemies using your heat actions as well as different fighting styles depending on the game and character. The combat in Yakuza is quite satisfying. I find it to have some of the best melee combat in most games. While Kiwami 2 is really good, I like having the different fighting styles in the Yakuza 0 and Yakuza Kiwami games. And I'm a huge fan of Majima and his breaker style. It's just funny to see breakdancing used as a weapon. But this is a very active game, so how can I compare this to a turn-based RPG? Let's take a look at Like a Dragon. Okay, here I'm not even doing anything and the enemies can't attack me until I pick my move. And until I make an attack, I have all the time in the world to make decisions. Now, the combat here is very interesting for an RPG, as you have some agency even when attacks are going on. If you use a skill, you get a button prompt to power up that skill with using either the X button or the Y button depending on the skill. On the other hand, if you're getting attacked, you can actually try to block it with the B button and defend against the attack even if you weren't defending in the first place. You can time it right and avoid a lot of damage in this game. To be honest, this is a very active version of a turn-based RPG. Having 4 characters also means you get more attacks and each character has their own style. You also get the ability to choose jobs. Each character has their unique job, but all male characters and all female characters get the same additional job options. That's a bit unfortunate, but it also means you can form your party as you want. The unique classes are actually pretty clever too. Namba here also has the ability to be like a homeless bum as his unique class, and he can do a quick power nap. Ichiban can be the hero who comes equipped with a bat, though personally I like making Ichiban a dancer because, okay, well, Majima is, and we get breakdancing as attacks again. Hold up, wait, this is actually starting to look similar. Alright, I've given you a chance to look at this, let me ask a quick question. What type of game is the original Yakuza series? Is it an RPG? Does it have RPG elements? Or is it not an RPG at all? I'll give you a moment to think about that while I talk about one other big change. Yakuza Like a Dragon has a lot more types of enemies. Enemies always appear to be Yakuza on the street, but when you enter battle they become any silly or zany idea, and each enemy gets their own special attacks and patterns and timing. There's even a little mini quest to collect all of them, calling them Sujamon. They're a lot more entertaining to collect than Pokemon in my opinion. Alright, so let's go back to that question. Is the original Yakuza games RPGs? I actually asked this question of the subreddit r/Yakuza games, and I really appreciate their answers. It seems that they were leaning heavily towards RPG elements, but not necessarily an RPG, and I'll admit, I was there. You see, when I started Yakuza 0, I would have actually called it not an RPG at all. I actively said it wasn't at the time. By the time Yakuza Kiwami 2 came around, I saw that you got little experience points from different tasks as well as fighting enemies. Okay, so you have experience and abilities. It's more like an RPG elements, kind of like Assassin's Creed. Well, sure, but I think it's beyond that. You can level up abilities in the original 3 games. You have equipment that you can put on. You have modal battles where you focus on fighting certain enemies. You have stats, healing items, even boss battles. RPGs really are not a firm definition for a video game genre anymore. Role-playing really isn't a part of it because, okay, technically you play the role of Mario in Mario games, but also, over the last 2 decades, the game industry has eroded the meaning of RPGs. Now, anything that has a level and experience points gets called an RPG, and honestly, I disagree with that. Sure, that's RPG elements, but RPGs are more than that. They tend to focus on stories now, and admittedly, there's going to be grind in most of them rather than a straight progression system. But the thing is, the combat in Yakuza Like a Dragon is turn-based. The combat in the original Yakuza games are active battle systems, and the thing is, I don't think that matters that much. Yakuza Like a Dragon made me start to realize something. I don't think Yakuza Like a Dragon is the first RPG in the series. It's just the first traditional RPG or JRPG with a turn-based battle system. I leveled up Kiryu in all 3 games already. I've added abilities, new fighting styles, new talents. I've equipped gears, I've drank potions in the middle of the battle to regain stats and more. The thing is, the combat that's been playing here looks very similar when you compare Like a Dragon and the other games. The only difference is in one, I pick an attack and it will play out, and in the other, I move close to an enemy and start to attack, choosing my attacks based on the stance that I'm in and which button I hit in which order. I'm still using similar attacks with similar results. One's just a little more strategic. I think because of that, Like a Dragon has made me accept that the Yakuza games are true RPGs, and that's great. But this is a head-to-head, so which style is better? Honestly, which one do you like? Do you like turn-based RPGs similar to the original Final Fantasies or Persona? Or do you like more active combat like the Tales of series or even Elder Scrolls? Personally, I think I would go with the original games. I really did enjoy Like a Dragon, but I also think the original combat systems are a bit more fun and more active. However, Like a Dragon has far more attacks, more strategy, the party system works well, and the job system is something that makes for more interesting choices to your style of gameplay. But this is really the subjective choice. Do you want turn-based or active battle? And I think that's going to be up to you. Conclusion. I'm a huge fan of this series. I think that's very obvious from this video. I've played the first 3 Yakuza games as they were released for PC over the last 2 years. They're amazing, excellent, whatever you want to say. Now that I've played Yakuza Like a Dragon, I'm struck by how similar yet different this game is. The party system really changes the story, the combat is different, but unlike other games that change genre, Like a Dragon actually feels like it's the same type of game as every other Yakuza game. It's just a different combat system, and while that's an important difference, if I'm really honest, it's far less of a change than I've heard people talking about. But still, a head-to-head deserves a winner, so which one is better? 3 games versus 1 is kind of cheating, let's be honest, it's always going to be the trilogy in that situation. So instead, let's ask, where does Yakuza Like a Dragon belong in this list of games? After playing at least 50 hours in all these titles, I think I still can definitively say Yakuza Kiwami 2 is my favorite. It just has excellent story, gameplay, and the most compelling side content. On the other side of the scale, The original Yakuza Kiwami is going to be the weakest so far. The boss battles and the story really dragged this game down, especially when I replayed it. I remembered most of these issues. While the Kiwami version of the game does add in the Majima Everywhere system, there's also a bit of a lack of content in the game. So what about Yakuza Like a Dragon? Well, okay, I think my second favorite game out of the series so far is going to have to be Yakuza 0. In most ways, Like a Dragon is a better game. The story is fantastic, the new battle system is refreshing, and I love having the new protagonist stick around with his party for the whole game. Yet, Yakuza Like a Dragon actually hides a little bit of grind, especially late in the game. The final chapters start increasing the boss's difficulty quickly to just hinder the player for no reason. So I heavily recommend Like a Dragon to any fan of the series. This game fits in perfectly with this franchise, even with its new protagonist and new battle system, but I would also suggest players start with the original 3 games in any order before jumping to Like a Dragon, and because this is always asked, start with 0, Kiwami, Kiwami 2, and perhaps wait for the others to come out now that we know they're coming. The big takeaway though is Like a Dragon isn't this brand new unique experience. This is like fudge-filled M&Ms instead of regular M&Ms. They're different, but they're still a delicious treat. If you haven't tried them, try them. That's what I have for the Yakuza series, and I want to thank you for listening to me talk about one of my favorite series. If you've enjoyed this, you might want to stick around because next time I'll be talking about my favorite games I played in 2020. Surprisingly, Yakuza Like a Dragon probably is not going to be on that list. What games could be better than this one? I'm also going to be popping up 2 videos here. I recently did a comparison like this between Hades and Dead Cells, so definitely check that one out. I also have a couple co-op games that my daughter and I enjoyed, so you should check that video out as well. Until then, I'm King Link, and thank you for watching.